What if one quiet night, the kind of night any of us could live, suddenly became the moment you feared for your life? What if a simple drive home, headlights glowing softly, music humming low, the peace of the evening settling over your shoulders, shattered in an instant beneath the weight of flashing blue lights? What if the person sworn to protect you pointed a gun at your face instead? Tonight's story is not fiction. It is not exaggerated. It is not a distant nightmare happening to someone else. It is the reality Black Americans face every single day. The reality of being seen as suspicious, dangerous, guilty, before ever speaking a word. And on this night, that reality came crashing down on a woman who had spent her entire life protecting this country. A woman who never imagined she'd fear for her life at the hands of someone wearing a uniform. A woman whose only crime was existing in the wrong place at the wrong time, in the wrong body, under the authority of the wrong officer. In a moment, you will see how a peaceful evening spiraled into a nightmare of racism, power, and near tragedy. How a loaded gun was pointed at an innocent woman's face. How one phone call changed everything, and how a courtroom would later shake under the weight of the truth. But before we begin, if stories of injustice, courage, truth, and racial reality matter to you, if you believe America deserves better, if you want to stand with those who refuse to stay silent, make sure you subscribe to Racist Reality right now, because every single day, we tell the stories that others are too afraid to confront, stories that open eyes, touch hearts, and force this nation to face the truth. And today's story might be the most powerful one yet. Let's begin. The quiet drive before the storm. The last strands of daylight clung stubbornly to the Virginia sky as Dr. Maya Reeves guided her black SUV down the stretch of Lone Pine Road, a mostly empty two-lane ribbon of asphalt running along quiet woods and old farmland. Richmond was nearly 40 minutes behind her, and with each mile she placed between herself and the city, she felt a small weight lift from her shoulders. A weight she had learned to carry so long that moments of release felt like borrowed grace. It had been another brutal day at the Mid-Atlantic FBI regional office. Endless briefings, urgent calls, crisis meetings that stretched far past the time when sane people ate dinner. But Maya wasn't complaining. At 46, she had learned exactly who she was: a servant of justice, a protector of the vulnerable, a woman unafraid of decisions that shook the ground other people walked on. But tonight, she wanted nothing more than silence, soft, unbroken, and kind. Her fingers tapped lightly against the steering wheel as a soothing jazz track flowed through the speakers. The horn of John Coltrane drifted like warm smoke inside the cabin. It wrapped around her, giving her the precious illusion that the world was softer than the sharp edges she navigated each day. This drive home, especially at dusk, had always been her sanctuary. There was something cleansing about watching a long day dissolve into twilight, like stress evaporating into the fading sky. She inhaled the hush of the moment, letting it settle deep in her chest. Finally, she thought, a moment to breathe. Her mind wandered, imagining herself stepping into her quiet home, shedding the stiffness of her blazer, lighting the amber-scented candle on her coffee table. She imagined curling into the sofa with the biography she'd been reading about an unsung civil rights leader whose courage had changed courts and communities alike. So often, Maya guided younger agents to find their purpose. But books like that reminded her of hers. She was still thinking of the passage she'd left halfway through when a sudden flash burst in her rearview mirror. Blue, red, white. A police cruiser's light stabbed through the darkness, reflecting harshly across her dashboard. Her stomach tightened with a painful, instinctive jolt. Her foot eased off the accelerator. Reflex, history, survival. The cruiser didn't just appear, it stormed into her space, barreling dangerously close behind her SUV, as if the officer wanted her to feel hunted before he even spoke a word. Her palms began to sweat. Her heartbeat shifted tempo, a subtle but telling change. After all her years of training, all her accomplishments, all her experience with federal law enforcement, one simple truth remained. A black woman alone at night with flashing blue lights behind her is never just a routine moment. It was a sentence she never wanted to admit out loud, but it lived inside her bones. She forced a steady breath. She checked her speed. 48 in a 50. She checked her signals, her mirrors, her lane position. Nothing wrong. Nothing questionable. Still, the cruiser's siren blared again, shrill, demanding, almost taunting. Maya swallowed hard. Why is he stopping me? For what? Her pulse thudded against her ribs like a warning drum. Carefully, visibly, she activated her right blinker and eased onto the gravel shoulder, a curtain of dust rising briefly as her SUV slowed to a stop. She switched on her interior lights, another survival habit, taught to her by her father when she was old enough to understand the danger her skin could invite. The headlights from the cruiser glared into her mirrors, bleaching the inside of her car with sharp, artificial brightness. Everything familiar in the cabin suddenly felt hostile in that glare. Maya sat still, hands positioned at the top of the wheel, open, visible. Her breaths were measured, but inside her mind, old conversations stirred. Her grandmother's warnings, her father's trembling voice during the talk every black child received, her own memories of friends on the receiving end of someone else's power. She whispered into the empty space of the SUV, "Stay calm." She reached forward and tapped the dashboard-mounted camera, ensuring it was recording. The soft blue light blinked on. Just knowing it was there steadied her. The cruiser's door opened, a figure emerged. The officer walked with heavy, deliberate footsteps, each step echoing like a countdown inside Maya's mind. He was tall, bulky. His silhouette alone radiated intimidation. His left hand swung freely, but his right hovered uncomfortably close to his holstered weapon. When he reached the window, he didn't greet her, didn't introduce himself, didn't ask if she was safe. He simply stared. His eyes scanned her face with the cold curiosity of someone examining a threat rather than a human being. His jaw tightened, and something in his expression, something sharp, dismissive, told Maya he had already decided who she was. "License and registration," he said sharply. His voice was flat, clipped, and carried an undercurrent of contempt. Maya kept her tone even, respectful. "Of course, officer. May I ask why I was stopped?" A smirk tugged at his mouth, small but unmistakably mocking. "You look suspicious." The word dug into her flesh. Suspicious. Not speeding. Not swerving. Not violating any law. Suspicious. Maya forced herself to breathe slowly. "Suspicious in what way? I wasn't—" He cut her off, irritation rising. "I didn't ask for your commentary. Give me the papers." Her breath slowed. She moved carefully, deliberately. "I'm reaching for my wallet," she narrated, as she had taught countless agents to do. "My hands will remain visible." He said nothing, but his hand inched closer to his holster. She retrieved her license from her purse and pulled the registration from the visor. Her fingers trembled slightly. She extended the documents. He snatched them without a thank you, without a glance of recognition that she had complied flawlessly. He stepped back, but just before turning toward his cruiser, he gave her another look. A look heavy with assumptions, with judgment, with the kind of disdain that made Maya's chest tighten. It was a look she had seen before, a look too many people she loved had seen, a look that said, "I already decided what you are." As he walked back to his cruiser, Maya exhaled shakily. A tremor ran through her hands. She tightened them around the wheel to hide the shaking from herself. She spoke softly, almost prayer-like, "Let this end safely." But deep inside, another truth stirred, an unwelcome, cold truth. Something about this officer felt off, wrong. Something in the way he moved, something in the way he glared, something in the way his voice carried not just authority, but aggression. In her 20 years of dealing with law enforcement at every level, local, state, federal, she had learned to read people, and whatever she sensed from him was not professionalism. It was hostility. It was an entitlement. It was a quiet, simmering anger just waiting for a spark. She adjusted her mirror again. He was still at his cruiser, but she could see him looking up repeatedly, checking her silhouette, her hands, her posture. Minutes crawled. The twilight deepened. The road remained empty except for their two vehicles, bathed in relentless beams of flashing red and blue. Finally, he approached again. His walk was different this time, sharper, heavier, like he had made a decision while sitting in his patrol car. He stopped at her window, face hardening. "Step out of the vehicle," he commanded. Maya blinked. "Is there a lawful reason for—" His lips curled into a disdainful half-smirk. "I said step out." Her pulse flickered. "Officer, with respect, I'm complying fully. I only need to understand the legal—" He leaned in, voice low and venomous. "People like you always try to play smart." The words hit her like a slap. People like you. A phrase heavy with centuries of cruelty. A phrase that had been weaponized against every generation of her family. A phrase that stripped away humanity and reduced her to a stereotype in his mind. Something broke inside her, not fear, but a deep, aching sorrow for the reality she was still forced to live in, even as one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country. She straightened in her seat. "Officer, I have the right to—" His voice snapped like a whip. "You have no rights unless I say you do." The sentence landed like ice in her lungs. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, soft and indifferent. Inside the SUV, the air felt suffocating. Maya sat frozen, heart pounding, not just with fear, but with disbelief, outrage, and a grief so old and so deep it felt carved into her DNA. This wasn't just a traffic stop. This wasn't just a power trip. This wasn't just an officer having a bad day. This was racism, raw and exposed. This was an abuse of power. This was a moment every Black American prayed they'd never face. And Maya understood with chilling clarity that her night, her peace, her safety, had just been stolen. First contact, suspicion. In blue, Officer Brent Walker stood at Maya's window like a wall, unyielding, emotionless, and full of a quiet kind of menace that could crush a person without raising a hand. The fog gathering around the edges of the road distorted the flashing blue and red lights behind him, making him appear almost spectral. A shape, a shadow, a threat. Maya kept both hands visible on the steering wheel, her back straight, her chin lifted. Her instincts screamed for caution, but the dignity inside her refused to bow, even in the presence of someone who clearly saw her as less than human. "Step out of the vehicle," Officer Walker repeated, his voice a rigid command. Maya crafted her response carefully, every syllable balanced between fear and strength. "I would like to comply, officer," she said, calm yet firm, "but I need to understand the legal basis for this request." His jaw clenched. That was when she saw it clearly, the instant flicker of irritation that crossed his face whenever she spoke with intelligence, clarity, or self-control. Some men resented a woman like that. Some resented a Black woman like that even more. He leaned forward, lowering his voice into something sharp. "I didn't ask what you need. I gave you an order." Maya inhaled slowly, anchoring herself. She had been trained for hostage situations, crisis negotiations, violent offenders. But none of that training erased the fundamental truth of this moment. It was her skin, not her job, not her behavior, that had triggered him. She tried again. "Officer, I mean no disrespect. I'm simply asking—" He slammed his open palm against her door. The sound cracked through the quiet road like a gunshot. Maya flinched. He smiled, just enough to let her know he'd seen her fear and enjoyed it. "Don't test me," he said. "Not tonight." For a heartbeat, the only sound was Maya's breath, shallow and trembling. She fought to control it, forcing her diaphragm to expand slowly, evenly. Anything sudden, anything that could be interpreted as a threat, could escalate the situation beyond return. "Officer Walker," she said, reading his name from the small brass tag pinned to his uniform. "I'm complying with your requests. I provided my license and registration. I simply want clarity." He scoffed. "You think you're entitled to something here?" "I think I'm entitled to safety," she replied, her voice no longer trembling. His expression hardened. "Safety," he repeated, dripping disbelief. "You all love that word. You all." There it was again. The line drawn, the category carved, the prejudice laid bare. He stepped back slightly, shining his flashlight through her window. The beam hit her face, blinding her. She winced as he angled it downward, sweeping it across her lap, the console, and the empty passenger seat. You carrying anything illegal? He asked, tone icy. Drugs? Weapons? Open containers? Anything I should know about? No, Maya answered. Nothing of the sort. Of course you'd say that. The accusation landed heavy. He hadn't found anything. But he didn't need evidence to justify his suspicion. He only needed her skin color, her presence, her existence in a place he believed she didn't belong. He circled the SUV, shining the flashlight at her tires, her bumper, her rear window. He tapped the trunk several times as if hoping a false sound would grant him authority to open it. All the while, Maya's breath quivered in her throat. This wasn't a stop. This was an interrogation, a hunt, a stripping down of dignity under the guise of protocol. He returned to her window, the flashlight still in his hand, though he no longer pretended to search for anything. So, he said, leaning closer, what's a woman like you doing out here this late? His tone suggested an accusation more than a question. I'm heading home, Maya replied. From where? From work. What kind of work? His eyes dared her to answer wrongly. For a moment she considered telling him she was a federal official, but her training advised against escalating with identity unless necessary. It could provoke him further. I work in law enforcement, she answered truthfully but vaguely. His eyes narrowed. Law enforcement? He repeated with sarcastic disbelief. Yeah, sure you do. He crossed his arms. Got a card? A badge? Proof? I'm not required to… There you go again, he snapped, telling me what the law is. You think you know more than me? Maya's fingers curled slightly on the wheel. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The attitude says it all. The attitude. The words stung in a way she'd felt too many times before. Words used to weaponize the confidence of black women into something threatening, inappropriate, deserving of punishment. She swallowed hard. Officer Walker, I'm cooperating. You've searched visually and there's nothing of concern. You don't get to decide what's of concern, he said. I do. For a moment, silence settled between them. Thick, suffocating, heavy with unspoken danger. Then his tone shifted, becoming sharper, darker. You know what I see? He asked. Maya forced herself to meet his gaze. What do you see, officer? I see someone who thinks she's smarter than me. Someone who thinks she doesn't have to listen. Someone who's hiding something. That's what I see. The pain bloomed inside Maya's chest. Not because of his words, but because of how familiar the moment felt. How many generations before her had lived the same experience? How many names were now etched into memorial walls because someone with a badge saw something that never existed? She thought of her father, her cousins, her community, the fear they carried every time blue lights flashed behind them. This was not new. This was history repeating itself, over and over. I'm hiding nothing, Maya said quietly. He leaned so close she could smell the coffee on his breath. His next words were a hiss. You think I care what you say? I can escalate this any way I want. You understand me? Her pulse spiked. Her breath hitched. A tremor rippled down her spine. Officer, Maya said carefully, I want this situation to remain calm. You've given me no cause for… He cut her off again. Give me your phone. What? Her heart dropped. Give me your phone, he repeated. Now. That's not lawful, Maya said, voice steady but thin. His fingers twitched near his holster. Her heart nearly stopped. Are you refusing an order from a police officer? He demanded. I'm refusing an unlawful order, she replied. He sneered. You really want to test me tonight, don't you? There was no right answer. No safe sentence. No phrase she could choose that wouldn't deepen his rage. And then he took a single step back, his face tightening with fury. Get out of the car, he said again. Right now. Maya's throat tightened. Officer, I do not feel safe stepping out. His expression changed in an instant, from rage to something far more dangerous. Conviction. The conviction of a man who believed his authority was unquestionable, unstoppable, and absolute. Not feeling safe isn't my problem, he said. You move when I say move. He reached for his radio, muttering something too fast for Maya to catch. But she knew that tone. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a status update. It was a threat. Her mind raced through every scenario she had ever trained for. This was spiraling out of control. Fast. Faster than anyone could have anticipated. She swallowed, steadying herself. "Officer Walker," she said calmly, "your actions are being recorded." He froze, his head tilted slightly. Then he gave her a slow, derisive smile, a smile that told her the truth. He did not fear cameras. He did not fear consequences. He did not fear accountability. And that was what terrified her most. A man who feared nothing was capable of anything. When respect isn't returned, Officer Brent Walker's smirk lingered in the cold night air long after his words dissolved into silence. The fog hanging over Lone Pine Road thickened, swirling under the flashing police lights like something alive, something watching, waiting, listening. Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest, a silent alarm passed down generations. It wasn't panic, not yet. Panic was uncontrolled. Panic was dangerous. This was something else, something more ancient, more sorrowful. The exhaustion of being judged before speaking, the dread of being feared for existing, the ache of knowing one wrong move could rewrite her fate. "Step out of the car," Walker repeated, this time slower, savoring each syllable like a threat rather than an instruction. Maya held her hands firmly on the steering wheel. "Officer, I have complied with every lawful request, but I do not feel safe exiting the vehicle without a clear reason." Her voice was calm, measured, controlled. The same tone she used in FBI crisis negotiations. The same tone she once used to coax a hostage taker off a rooftop. But this time, the person she was negotiating with held all the power, all the control, and none of the accountability. Walker leaned even closer, his breath hot and sour through the open window. "You're not the one who decides what's safe," he hissed. His words burrowed under her skin. She felt suddenly small in the driver's seat, despite her authority, her rank, her years of service to this country. None of that mattered right now. Not her achievements, not her credentials, not her title. In this moment, all he saw was a black woman refusing to submit. He shone the flashlight directly into her face, the beam harsh enough to make her eyes water. "Look at me," he barked. She tried to turn her head slightly away, but he forced the flashlight to follow her gaze. "I said, look at me!" Maya blinked against the sting, her eyes narrowing. "Are you hiding something?" he demanded. "My eyes look a little nervous." "My eyes are reacting to the flashlight," she said. He chuckled darkly. "You think you're funny?" "No," she whispered. "I think I'm being mistreated." That word, mistreated, clipped something inside him. His jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles in his temple twitched. "You don't get to accuse me of anything." She breathed slowly, trying to steady herself. "Officer Walker," she said carefully, "you've accused me of being suspicious, without evidence. You've suggested I may be carrying illegal items, without cause. You've raised your voice, used harsh language, and now you're demanding that I exit the vehicle without a legal basis. This is..." He slammed the flashlight against her window. The sound cracked like a hammer striking glass. Maya gasped. The echo of the impact vibrated through her bones. For a moment, she truly believed the window would shatter, that she would be exposed to the night air, vulnerable, defenseless. Walker's breathing grew heavier. "I don't care what you think this is," he growled. "I give the orders. You follow the orders. That's how this works." Maya swallowed hard, fighting the wave of fear rising inside her. He wasn't acting like a trained officer. He was acting like a man whose ego had been bruised, a man who would do anything to reclaim control. Her hands trembled slightly on the wheel. "You're shaking," he observed, amused. "Good. Means you understand who's in charge." She lifted her chin. "Fear does not equal guilt." He laughed. "You sound like a lawyer. You think I care?" His flashlight drifted again, over her lap, her torso, her shoulders. He wasn't searching for anything. He was asserting dominance, reducing her dignity one scan at a time. "Where were you going?" he demanded. "Home." "From where?" "Work." "Doing what?" "I told you, I work in law enforcement." He scoffed loudly. "Law enforcement? Lady, the only law you know is how to break it." The insult hit her differently this time, not because of the words, but because of the hatred behind them. A hatred so intense she felt it radiate from him like heat. Her father once told her, "Racism isn't always shouted. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it smiles, sometimes it wears a uniform. Tonight she was wearing a badge and pointing a flashlight at her soul. Maya closed her eyes for 1 second. Just 1 second to breathe, to center, to survive. But as soon as she opened them again, Walker made his next move. His hand dropped to his gun. He didn't draw it, not yet, but he let his fingers rest on the holster, thumb lightly tapping the securing strap. It was not a threat. It was a warning. "You don't get to refuse me," he said. "If I tell you to step out, you step out. I have the right to remain inside my vehicle unless there is probable cause," she replied, voice trembling despite her best efforts. "Probable cause?" he snapped. "Your attitude is probable cause?" Her heart sank. There it was. The trap, the manipulation, the weaponizing of black emotion. He wanted her upset. He wanted her rattled. He wanted an excuse to escalate. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Not from fear, but from the outrage, the humiliation, the profound sadness of reliving a story she thought her rank could protect her from. How naive. No title in the world could shield her from racism. "Ooh, look at that," Walker said, mocking her expression. "Getting emotional now?" Maya wiped the corner of one eye quickly. "I am trying to de-escalate." "De-escalate?" he snorted. "Lady, you're about 30 seconds from being dragged out of that car." Her stomach dropped. He stepped back again, adjusting his stance, widening his feet, squaring his shoulders, the posture of a man preparing for confrontation. The road was empty. The woods were silent. The night was suffocating. She realized then, with sickening clarity, this man wanted a reaction. He wanted to assert dominance. He wanted to break her. Her voice softened. "Officer, you are escalating a situation that did not need to be confrontational." His nostrils flared. "Shut up!" She froze. "Excuse me?" she whispered. "I said shut up." His voice dripped venom. "I'm not here to listen to you. I'm here to check if you're a danger to the public." "A danger?" she echoed, stunned. "People like you always are." There it was again. The line, the division, the poison that seeped through every word he spoke. "People like you." The phrase hit her with more force than the slap of his hand on her car ever could. It spoke of history, bloody, painful history. It spoke of assumptions, stereotypes, centuries of dehumanization. She tried to speak, but her voice caught. "Officer Walker, I have done nothing wrong." "You've done everything wrong," he said coldly. "You questioned me. You hesitated. You tried to challenge my authority. That's enough." Her pulse hammered against her ribs. She understood something now. He wasn't reacting to her actions. He was reacting to her presence. Walker took one final step back and rested his hand fully on his gun. That was when Maya's training surged to the surface. She reached toward the dashboard, slow and deliberate, letting him see every millimeter of motion. His posture stiffened instantly. "What are you doing?" he barked. "I'm showing you," she said softly, "that I am recording everything." She tapped the dashboard camera with 2 fingers. His face darkened. "Oh," he said, voice low and poisonous. "You think that's going to save you?" He leaned closer, face inches from hers. "You think I'm afraid of a camera?" He chuckled, a deep, unsettling sound. Then his expression changed, sharpening, twisting. He whispered almost gleefully, "You're about to learn. I'm afraid of nothing." The words sent a shiver through her bones. The night air felt colder. Her heart felt heavier. Her world felt smaller. And all around her the darkness closed in, slow, suffocating, inevitable. This was no longer just a bad encounter. This was the beginning of a nightmare. A nightmare she would have to survive with nothing but courage, clarity, and faith. Gun in the night pressed in on Lone Pine Road, like a closing fist, the fog thickening into a ghostly veil between the pines. The flashing police lights carved violent streaks of red and blue across Maya's windshield, pulsing like warning beacons in the dark. Something in the world felt off balance, trembling, as if fate itself were holding its breath. Officer Brent Walker's last words lingered in the air, sharp enough to slice through bone. "You're about to learn. I'm afraid of nothing." Maya's breath caught. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, echoing like distant drums. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. She could sense it, that thin, fragile line between hostility and violence, a line that officers were trained to control, but some abused for power. He stepped back, boots crunching against the gravel. For a moment, Maya hoped he was retreating, maybe reconsidering, maybe calming down. But then she saw it, his hand, lowering toward his holster, slowly, deliberately, purposefully. Her stomach dropped. The air tightened. The world narrowed. A cold shock spread through her limbs. He's going to draw it. Her throat constricted. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't blink. She couldn't make sense of the reality unfolding before her. The flashlight beam hit her face again. "Get out of the car," he repeated, but now his voice was no longer raised. It was controlled, icy, lethal. "This is your final warning." Maya's heart raced painfully against her ribs. Her voice came out small but steady. "Officer Walker, I have complied with everything within my legal rights. You still haven't provided—" He erupted. "Get out!" His shout thundered through the night, startling birds from the nearby trees. The sound tore through the quiet, ripping away any illusion of safety. The rage in his tone wasn't procedural. It was personal. Maya remained still. Her instincts screamed at her to obey, but her conscience, her training, her sense of justice, anchored her in place. "Officer," she said softly, "I do not feel safe stepping out under these conditions." His face twisted. "Not safe?" he spat. "Lady, you're about to be a whole lot less safe if you don't do what I say." A chill crawled down her spine. Fear expanded inside her. So quickly she felt dizzy. But beneath the fear was something else. Something deeper, more painful. The knowledge that no matter who she was, no matter her rank, no matter her accomplishments, no matter her service to this country, none of it mattered at this moment. To him, she was just another black body to control. He knocked on her window again, harder this time. The blow rattled through her door. "You think recording me will save you?" he taunted. "Go ahead, use your phone. Use your stupid little camera. Do you think anyone's going to take your side over mine?" Maya inhaled sharply. She forced herself to think, to strategize, to survive. "Officer, your superiors will see this. I will report your behavior. I will not let this incident go unexamined." He froze. Then he leaned in, his voice low and venomous. "You think I'm scared of the consequences?" His hand moved, not to the flashlight, not to the radio, not to adjust his belt, but to unclip the retention strap on his holster. Maya's breath hitched. Her mind screamed, "Please, God, no!" He pulled the gun. The black metal glinted under the flashing lights. Sharp, cold, merciless. The barrel lifted, rising, aimed at her face, at her life. Maya felt her entire body contract. A wave of terror crashed through her chest, knocking the breath out of her lungs. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't even blink. Her hands stayed glued to the wheel, open, visible, trembling. Her mind raced through every name, every case, every news headline. Lives stolen in split seconds, families torn apart. Stories ended prematurely under the weight of someone's prejudice. She thought of her father, her mother, her little nieces who idolized her agents who trusted her community believed in her ancestors who died with hope that future generations would be safer. And here she was, with a gun pointed at her for doing nothing wrong. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Officer Walker, put the weapon down. This is an unlawful use of force." His expression twisted into contempt. "You don't get to tell me what's lawful." Her heart pounded. She could feel it in her throat, in her fingertips, in her temples. Every instinct screamed for her to avoid any sudden movement. Inside the SUV, the air felt suffocating. "Hands on the wheel," he barked. "My hands are on the wheel," she whispered. "Don't move!" She didn't. His finger hovered dangerously near the trigger. His stance widened, the stance of someone ready to fire. "Get out of the car," he ordered again, gun unwavering. Her mind raced. If I move, he could shoot. If I don't move, he could shoot. She steadied her breath. "Officer, please, lower the weapon." He barked a laugh. cold and cruel. Begging now? Thought you said you work in law enforcement? What, FBI, CIA, judge, governor? He snorted. Let me guess. You're just another liar. She inhaled, gathering every ounce of courage left in her. I am a federal officer, she said, his face twisted with amusement. Oh, really? Show me your badge. Slowly. I cannot reach without risking. Do it. She didn't move. The barrel inched closer. Her eyes widened. She felt time suspending itself in a single, terrifying heartbeat. She made a decision, not out of pride, but survival. I'm calling your superior, she said quietly. He blinked, momentarily thrown off. Before he could react, she slowly extended her hand toward the dashboard-mounted phone. Her movements were precise, deliberate, transparent. Don't you, he began, but she had already tapped the call icon. Her voice, though trembling, was clear. This is Dr. Maya Reeves, the FBI Regional Director. I am being held at gunpoint by Officer Brent Walker on Lone Pine Road. Send the sheriff immediately. Walker's face was drained of color. For a split second, just a split second, she saw fear flash in his eyes. Not empathy, not remorse, not humanity, but the fear of consequences. He lowered the gun a fraction, but not fully. Not enough to reassure her, not enough to prove she was out of danger. What did you just say? He stammered. She didn't answer. Her phone remained connected, the sheriff's dispatcher voice faint in the background. Walker swallowed hard. His posture remained tense, defensive, and irrational. You're lying, he muttered. You're lying. That's not possible. Maya kept her gaze steady on the gun. She didn't dare look away. Your actions are on video, she whispered. Every word, every threat, every movement. His breathing grew fast and erratic. For a moment, it looked as though he might fire out of sheer panic. But then, the faint wail of another siren echoed through the distance. Walker stiffened. No, 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 he whispered under his breath. You weren't supposed to call anyone. But he didn't holster the gun. He didn't step back. He didn't admit fault. Instead, he aimed the weapon more firmly. You think this is over? He hissed. You think you're safe? You think anyone's going to believe your version over mine? Maya stared at the barrel, the black void at its center, the void that had swallowed so many lives before her. Truth always comes to light, she said softly. He flinched. The sirens grew louder. A promise, a warning, a lifeline. Walker's jaw clenched. His grip tightened. The gun trembled. And Maya realized the terrifying truth. He wasn't in control of her anymore. He wasn't even in control of himself. The moment teetered on a knife's edge, between justice and tragedy, between restraint and violence, between life and death. Her breath shook, her heart ached, her resolve hardened. She whispered into the night, to herself, to her ancestors, to anyone listening. Please let me live. The arrival of Sheriff Hale. The sirens in the distance grew louder, rising like a warning from the night itself. Their echo trembled through the fog-heavy air, weaving around the pine trees and spilling into the narrow road where Dr. Maya Reeves sat frozen, hands still glued to the wheel, staring down the barrel of Officer Walker's gun. Her heart beat in slow, painful thuds, every pulse a reminder that she was still alive, but only barely. Walker's hands weren't steady anymore. His chest rose and fell too quickly. His eyes darted between her and the approaching lights. He was unraveling. Put the phone down, he demanded, though it was clear he had lost control of the situation. Maya didn't speak. She didn't lower her gaze. She didn't blink. She had survived this far by refusing to let him see her break. The siren grew louder, closer now, until the rays of another police vehicle split the fog. Blue and white beams flashed like lightning, illuminating Walker's trembling figure and the cruel silhouette of the gun aimed at Maya's face. Walker stepped back, only an inch, but it was the first sign that reality was finally catching up to him. Damn it, he muttered under his breath, his voice cracking. The second cruiser came to a stop behind his car. Maya exhaled shakily, her first real breath in what felt like hours. She didn't move, though. She couldn't. Any movement might trigger Walker. His pride was a fragile thing, and wounded pride in the hands of a man with a gun was always dangerous. The driver's door of the second cruiser swung open. Sheriff Thomas Hale stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, experienced. His uniform carried the weight of authority, but his eyes carried the weight of responsibility. A responsibility that Officer Walker had clearly abandoned the moment he chose hatred over duty. Sheriff Hale approached the scene briskly, his boots crunching against gravel, his breath steaming in the cold air. He saw the raised gun. He froze. "Walker!" he barked, voice loud enough to slice through the night. "What the hell are you doing?" Walker jerked, startled like a child caught misbehaving. His grip tightened on the gun, then loosened, then tightened again. A dangerous rhythm. "Sheriff!" "She wasn't listening," he stammered. "She refused my orders. She recorded me. She tried to put the gun down," Sheriff Hale commanded. His voice reverberated across the road. It wasn't anger that fueled it. It was horror. A horror born from seeing one of his officers standing on the brink of a catastrophic mistake, a mistake that would change all their lives. Walker hesitated. "Sheriff, you don't understand," he said, stepping slightly to the side. "She was resisting. She wouldn't get out of the car. She challenged me." "She challenged your authority," Hale snapped. "That isn't a crime." Walker blinked rapidly, his mind spiraling. She acted suspicious." "There is no suspicious behavior visible here," Hale shot back. He took another step forward. "Lower the weapon, Brent. Now." This time his voice softened, not out of mercy, but out of fear that one wrong tone could push Walker over the edge. Walker's breathing turned erratic. His arm twitched. The gun wavered. Maya's heart stilled. She knew this moment, this razor-thin moment, would determine whether she walked away alive or died on this lonely road. Finally, with a broken exhale, Officer Walker lowered the gun. Not all the way, not safely, but down enough that Maya no longer stared directly into its barrel. Sheriff Hale moved forward immediately, placing himself between Walker and Maya's window. He raised both hands slowly, not in surrender, but in caution. "It's okay," he said to Walker. "You're going to hand me the gun." Walker shook his head, gripping the weapon more tightly again. "Brent," Hale said gently, "give me the gun." For a moment, the only sound was Walker's labored breathing. Then, reluctantly, painfully, he placed the gun into the sheriff's open palm. Sheriff Hale exhaled deeply, closing his fingers around the weapon with something like grief. He holstered it securely on his own belt and stepped toward Maya's window. Her hands were still on the wheel. Her shoulders trembled. Her breath came unevenly. Sheriff Hale's voice softened. "Ma'am, can you roll down your window fully?" Maya did, and the second he saw her face, he froze. Recognition swept over him like a shockwave. "Oh my God," he whispered. You're Dr. Maya Reeves?" Maya nodded faintly. "Yes, Sheriff. I was heading home." Sheriff Hale closed his eyes, not in shame, but in devastation, at the injustice unfolding under his watch. He turned to Walker, fury rising through his chest. "Brent, do you have any idea who she is?" Walker's eyes darted between them. I don't care who she is," he muttered. "She didn't follow my orders." "She is the FBI regional director," Hale snapped. Walker paled. Maya lifted her chin. "Sheriff, my title should not determine whether I live or die tonight," she said quietly. "I complied within the law. I simply asked for a procedure." Her voice shook, but her words were made of steel. Sheriff Hale swallowed hard. "You're absolutely right, ma'am." He turned toward his officers behind him and signaled. "Carter, you're done," Hale declared. "Hand him over." Two deputies approached Walker. This time it was Walker who looked small. It was Walker whose eyes widened in fear. It was Walker who trembled. His arrogance evaporated the moment accountability appeared. "No, wait, Sheriff, please, she was provoking, Enough," Hale barked. "You pointed a gun at an unarmed woman who posed no threat. You violated procedure. You violated ethics. You violated your oath." Walker stuttered. "Sheriff, I didn't mean..." "Mistakes are forgetting paperwork," Hale snapped, not aiming a firearm at an innocent citizen. The deputies grabbed Walker's arms. He didn't fight. He couldn't. As they led him a few feet away, Maya stepped out of her car slowly, her knees weak from fear and adrenaline. The fog touched her skin. The night air felt colder now. The weight of what almost happened pressed heavily onto her heart. Sheriff Hale approached her gently. "Dr. Reeves, I am so sorry." She shook her head, swallowing the burning lump in her throat. "This can't just be about apologizing," she said softly. "Not for me, and not for the countless people who never lived long enough to demand justice." Hale lowered his gaze. "I understand. I want a full investigation," Maya continued. Her voice strengthened with every word. "A report filed. A review board was notified. His every action tonight is documented." "You have my word," Hale said quietly. "It won't be swept aside." Walker, now handcuffed, lowered his head, humiliated, afraid, exposed. His earlier power had evaporated into dust. Maya looked at him for a long, quiet moment, not with hatred, but with sorrow, because she knew, if this could happen to her, an FBI director, what chance did an ordinary black citizen have? She inhaled deeply. Her voice trembled, but her words did not. "Sheriff, this is bigger than me," she said. "This is about a country that must choose whether it wants justice or fear, equality or prejudice, courage or cruelty." Sheriff Hale nodded, emotion flickering in his eyes. "We will choose better," he whispered. "I promise." As Maya watched Walker being escorted away, she didn't feel triumph. She felt the heavy ache of truth, the truth that change comes only when someone refuses to stay silent, even when silence would be safer. Tonight she lived, but too many before her didn't, and that, more than anything, fueled her resolve. The internal reckoning. The night after the confrontation felt impossibly long for Dr. Maya Reeves. Sleep evaded her, slipping from her grasp each time she closed her eyes. Every time she drifted into half-consciousness, the image of Brent Walker's gun would surge back into her mind. The metal gleaming under the red and blue pulse of police lights, the barrel perfectly aligned with her face, the weight of centuries of fear pressing against her lungs. It wasn't just the threat of the gun that haunted her. It was the deeper wound, the knowledge that even at the highest ranks of federal law enforcement, she was still a target, still a suspicion, still less than in the eyes of someone with power. Around dawn, Maya finally rose from her bed, exhaustion clinging to her bones like a damp coat. But there was work to be done, work that demanded clarity, courage, and persistence, because what happened to her wasn't just personal. It was systemic. It was historical. It was a reflection of a country that had yet to heal from its own shadows. The investigation begins. By midday, Sheriff Thomas Hale had already taken swift action. He called an internal meeting, one far more serious than the typical reviews his department conducted. His voice was grave as he addressed his senior officers. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," he said. "This was a breach of protocol, ethics, and the law. Walker's actions were unjustifiable and dangerous." The room fell silent. Several officers exchanged uneasy glances, not because they disagreed, but because they knew what this meant for their department. The video Maya recorded was clear, damning, irrefutable. The county had no choice but to act. Walker was brought into the station in the early morning hours. He was no longer allowed to wear his uniform. His badge was taken, his service weapon locked away, his access was revoked. He was placed in an interview room, the same kind of room he had interrogated suspects in. Only this time, he was the one being questioned. Deputies from Internal Affairs sat across from him, their recordings documenting every word, every hesitation, every contradiction. Walker tried to rationalize. "She didn't listen. She challenged my authority. She acted suspicious. I felt threatened." But none of it aligned with protocol. None of it matched the video. None of it justified drawing a gun on an unarmed woman who never raised her voice, never moved aggressively, never posed a threat. The deeper truth, the one Walker refused to acknowledge, was that he felt threatened by the idea of a black woman asserting her rights. Sheriff Hale released a formal statement announcing Walker's suspension. But behind the scenes, he knew suspension wasn't enough. This wasn't something that could be resolved with paid leave or another training seminar. This was a wound in the trust between citizens and those sworn to protect them. a wound that had been bleeding for decades. Public oversight becomes involved. When Maya submitted her video to the police oversight board, they responded within hours. The footage was chilling. Walker's escalating aggression, his weapon drawn without cause, his insults, his disregard for due process, his racially charged comments. The oversight board didn't hesitate. They launched a full-scale investigation, pulling Walker's service record, reviewing past complaints, interviewing witnesses, and analyzing every second of the footage. What they discovered wasn't surprising, but it was damning. Walker had a history, a pattern, a trail of incidents where his conduct bordered on abusive, aggressive, or discriminatory. Complaints filed by citizens who were dismissed, warnings issued but never enforced, minor reprimands that merely slapped the surface of a much deeper problem. But until now, nothing had forced accountability. It struck Maya deeply, painfully, to see how many people before her had been ignored. How many voices had gone unheard because they did not carry the title she did. How many lacked the power, the platform, the visibility to demand justice. She felt their presence with her now, 1,000 silenced experiences echoing in her chest. Maya steps forward publicly. 2 days after the incident, the press had already caught wind of the story. Rumors circled social media. Reporters called the station, asking for statements. The community began to buzz with outrage and fear. Maya knew this was bigger than her reputation or privacy. It was a reflection of the lived reality of millions, and someone needed to speak the truth out loud. So she made the decision. She would hold a press conference. When she stepped up to the podium, the room was crowded. Journalists, cameras, advocates, and countless citizens waiting for someone to articulate what they themselves had felt for years. The microphone crackled softly as she spoke. "My name is Dr. Maya Reeves," she began, her voice steady but weighted with emotion. "And what happened to me on Lone Pine Road was not an isolated incident." The room fell silent. It was an abuse of power. It was unjustified. It was dangerous, and it was shaped, unquestionably, by racial bias. Her words rippled through the space like a wave. "This is not just my story," she continued. "This is the story of thousands of Americans who have been mistreated, profiled, threatened, or silenced because of the color of their skin." Her gaze swept across the audience, meeting the eyes of those who looked back at her with pain, anger, and validation. "This is not about punishing a single officer," she said. "This is about exposing a system that allows misconduct to go unchecked, a system that fails to protect the people it was built to serve." She paused, not for drama, but to steady the emotion rising in her throat. "Power must never be a weapon," she said softly, "and wearing a badge should never give someone the right to strip another person of their dignity or humanity." A quiet murmur moved through the crowd, not of shock, but of recognition. Maya concluded her speech with a promise. "I will use every resource available to me, every ounce of influence I have, to ensure accountability, transparency, and reform. Not just for myself, but for every person who has suffered quietly, for every family who has buried a loved one, for every community that deserves safety, trust, and justice." When she stepped away from the podium, applause rose. Not loud, not celebratory, but solemn, respectful, hopeful. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the beginning of accountability, a moment of human reflection. After the press conference, Maya stepped outside alone. The air smelled of damp earth and distant pine. She wrapped her coat around herself and tilted her head toward the sky. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel powerful. She felt tired, soul tired. But beneath the exhaustion was something bright, something fierce, purpose. She knew reform wouldn't come quickly. Change never did. But she also knew this: silence had never saved anyone. Courage, even painful courage, changed nations. And as she watched the clouds drift slowly across the fading sun, Maya whispered a quiet truth to herself, a truth she hoped others would feel in her story. You deserve dignity, you deserve safety, you deserve respect, and no one, no badge, no weapon, no hatred can take away your humanity. The investigation continues that night. The Oversight Board released an update. Officer Brent Walker was officially detained pending further review. The FBI cooperated with local authorities. Community leaders expressed outrage and support. A wave of protest began forming in the city, and Maya was sitting in her living room, finally letting her body collapse into the couch, pressed her hand to her heart, not because she feared what would come, but because she knew this was only the beginning. The trial that shook a city. 2 months passed between the night Maya Reeves survived and the morning officer Brent Walker was brought before a judge. Yet the weight of that night never left her shoulders. It lingered behind her eyes when she tried to sleep. It tightened around her chest when she drove past the spot where everything had gone wrong. It lived in her voice whenever she spoke about justice, courage, or the unspoken fears carried by Black Americans every time flashing blue lights appeared behind them. But today was not about fear. Today was about truth. Today was about justice. The Richmond courthouse bustled with tension long before the sun cleared the horizon. Reporters lined the front steps. Activists held signs with messages calling for accountability. Community members from all backgrounds, Black, white, Latino, Asian, gathered shoulder to shoulder, united by a simple belief. No one, not even a police officer, should be above the law. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. Journalists angled cameras. Lawyers reviewed notes. Observers whispered in the gallery, their words blending into a low hum of expectation. Brent Walker sat at the defense table, hands clasped tightly in front of him. He wore a simple suit, not the uniform he once believed would protect him. His face had lost the arrogant edge he carried that night on Lone Pine Road. Now he looked hollow, pale and shaken by a future he could no longer control. His attorney leaned close, whispering strategy, but Walker seemed distracted, glancing repeatedly toward the door at the back of the courtroom. He was waiting for her. When Dr. Maya Reeves finally stepped inside, the room shifted, not because she sought attention, far from it, but because her presence carried weight, strength, legitimacy, truth. She wore a dark suit, her hair tied neatly back, her expression composed but undeniably solemn. She didn't walk like someone seeking revenge. She walked like someone who understood the responsibility of speaking for millions whose voices had been ignored. As she took her seat, Walker looked down at the table, unable to meet her eyes. Opening arguments begin. The prosecution stood first. This case is not about a traffic stop, the prosecutor began, projecting his voice clearly. It is about an officer who abused his authority, escalated without cause, used threats, profanity, and racial bias, and ultimately pointed a loaded firearm at an unarmed woman who was fully compliant and posed no danger of any kind. The prosecutor lifted a hand toward Maya. And that woman is not just anyone. She is Dr. Maya Reeves, a federal law enforcement official with decades of experience, training, and service to this country. But on that night, none of that mattered, because Officer Walker did not see her credentials. He did not see her professionalism. He did not see her humanity. He saw only his assumptions, and he acted on them. The courtroom fell still. Today, the prosecutor concluded, we determine whether those actions were lawful, whether they were ethical, and whether they reflect the standards we expect from those who swear to protect us. Walker's attorney stood next. He painted Walker as overwhelmed, stressed, a man who made a poor split-second decision, a man under pressure, a man who didn't intend harm. The words drifted across the courtroom like smoke. Easy to say, easy to hide behind. But then came the turning point. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, we would like to present video evidence. The courtroom watches the truth. The lights dimmed slightly. A monitor flickered to life. And there it was, the entire encounter. Maya's calm voice, Walker's escalating aggression, his insults, his threats, his flashlight aimed like a weapon, his hand twitching near his holster, his voice dripping with disdain. People like you. Every person in the court watched with a tightening throat. But when the video reached the moment where Walker drew his gun, the room inhaled sharply as one, a collective gasp. Some covered their mouths, some shook their heads, some wiped tears. Even the judge's expression hardened. They watched as Walker pointed the gun at her face, As Maya remained still, hands on the wheel, trembling but composed, as she begged for due process, as she called the sheriff with a voice filled with terror and courage, as Walker refused to lower the weapon until sirens approached. When the video ended, silence hung in the air. Maya looked straight ahead, refusing to crumble under the memory. Walker kept his eyes shut, jaw trembling. Maya takes the stand. When her name was called, she stepped forward with quiet dignity. She placed her hand on the Bible, took the oath, and sat in the witness chair. The prosecutor smiled gently, encouragingly. "Dr. Reeves," he began, "can you describe in your own words what happened that night?" Maya nodded softly. Her voice was steady, but every sentence carried emotional weight. "I was driving home after work," she began. "I obeyed all traffic laws. I had committed no violation. When I was pulled over, I did everything I was trained to do. Hands visible, lights on, no sudden movements." She clasped her hands, inhaling deeply. But Officer Walker escalated the situation almost immediately. He displayed hostility, shined a flashlight into my eyes, insulted me, and repeatedly ignored my requests for lawful reasoning. Her throat tightened slightly. "I have faced danger many times in my career. I have encountered violent criminals, hostage situations, armed confrontations, but I have never been afraid for my life the way I was that night." Walker's attorney stood. "Dr. Reeves," he said carefully, "is it possible that Officer Walker simply misjudged the situation due to stress? That he acted rashly rather than maliciously?" Maya turned her gaze toward him. Her eyes were gentle, but unyielding. "I have been in law enforcement for 20 years, she said. "I know the difference between fear and hostility, between protocol and prejudice, between stress and hatred." The courtroom leaned in. She continued softly, "If his behavior had been caused by stress, he would not have insulted me. If it were protocol, he would not have drawn his weapon without cause. If it were a misjudgment, he would not have aimed his gun at my face while I sat perfectly still." Her voice broke, not from weakness, but from heartbreak. "No citizen, no human being, deserves to be treated the way I was treated that night." She looked at the judge. "This case is not about punishing one officer. It's about deciding whether we will tolerate abuse of power, whether we will allow racism to hide behind badges, whether we will protect our communities from those who misuse authority." That night, I was not seen as a law enforcement official. I was not seen as a woman. I was not seen as a human being. Tears welled in her eyes, and in the eyes of many in the gallery. "I refuse to accept that this is the standard," she said, "and I refuse to stay silent when silence costs lives." Closing arguments. The prosecutor delivered a powerful conclusion. This video is not ambiguous. Dr. Reeves was in danger not because of her behavior, but because of Officer Walker's biases. Racism is not always loud. Sometimes it is a whisper, a presumption, a finger tightening on a trigger. Today we decide whether that is acceptable in our society. The defense tried, but their arguments felt thin, flimsy against the truth. The verdict, after deliberation, the jury returned. The room held its breath. The foreperson stood. Her voice did not waver. "We found the defendant, Brent Walker, guilty of abuse of power, guilty of racial discrimination, guilty of endangering the life of another person, guilty of violating police conduct principles." Walker closed his eyes. His shoulders collapsed inward. His face crumpled. The judge pronounced the sentence, 4 years in prison. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Not cheers, not celebration, but a collective exhale. Justice had not erased the pain, but it had finally spoken. Maya's eyes softened, not triumphantly, but sorrowfully. Because justice, when born from tragedy, always carries grief. A step forward. When she walked outside, reporters crowded her, microphones raised. One asked, "Dr. Reeves, do you feel victorious?" She shook her head gently. "Justice is not victory," she said. "Justice is responsibility. Justice is accountability. Justice is love expressed through law." Another asked, "What do you hope comes from this case?" Maya lifted her chin, her voice becoming a beacon. "I hope America chooses humanity over hatred," she said. "I hope we choose courage over silence." I hope we never again allow power to overshadow compassion. She paused, letting the words settle over the crowd. And I hope every person watching this understands. No matter your race, your job, your income, your background, your life matters. Your dignity matters. And you deserve to be safe. The crowd fell silent, moved, humbled, inspired. And for the first time in a long time, Maya felt something warm moving through her chest. Not joy, not pride, but hope. A new call for America. The verdict echoed through the chambers of the Richmond courthouse long after the gavel struck. 4 years, a guilty officer, a precedent, a message. But as Dr. Maya Reeves stepped down from the courtroom steps into the autumn air, the weight on her heart did not disappear. Justice had been served, yes, but justice alone could not erase trauma. It could not undo the fear that had pulsed through her veins on a lonely road. It could not return the lost sense of security, nor repair the centuries of wounds carried by people who looked like her. The cameras flashed around her, journalists calling out questions, supporters reaching for her hand, activists chanting her name. But for a moment she felt separated from all of it, as though she were suspended in a quiet sphere of reflection. Her heart whispered a truth deeper than pride. Justice is the beginning, not the end. 2 days after the verdict, a meeting was held at the state capitol, one that would change the trajectory of policing across the region. Lawmakers, community leaders, civil rights advocates, and law enforcement officials gathered around a vast mahogany table. The temperature in the room felt tense, charged with both anger and possibility. Maya took her seat. Her voice carried a new gravity, not from authority, but from lived experience. "We have 2 choices," she began. "We can treat this incident as an isolated event, or we can acknowledge that it is part of a larger, deeper problem." Her eyes moved across the room, finding both allies and skeptics. "If we pretend this is just about one man," she continued, "then we condemn ourselves to repeat this tragedy again and again. But if we face the truth, the systemic truth, then we can build a safer future for every single American." A senator leaned back, arms crossed. "And what truth is that, Dr. Reeves?" She held his gaze without flinching. "That racism exists in policing. That implicit bias shapes decisions. That power can be abused. And that our communities, especially communities of color, have suffered for far too long under the weight of a system that does not see them fully." Silence fell. But it wasn't resistance. It was recognition. Every person in that room knew it. Some had denied it. Some had feared speaking it. Some had been swallowed by the guilt of participating in a system they didn't know how to fix. But today, the truth sat openly on the table. Undeniable. "Reform begins," Sheriff Thomas Hale spoke next. His voice carried remorse but also determination. "What happened on Lone Pine Road should never happen again," he said. "We failed Dr. Reeves, but more importantly, we failed our community." He pulled out a document, a proposal drafted overnight with the help of civil rights consultants. Mandatory racial bias training, expanded mental health evaluations for officers, automatic suspension for improper use of force, independent oversight for misconduct investigations, body cameras required at all times, with penalties for disabling them, a new recruitment rubric to prioritize emotional intelligence, cultural competency, and ethical judgment. As he read through each line, Maya felt something stir inside her. Not relief, not triumph, but something gentler and more resilient. Hope. Real, steady hope. Community response. News of the case spread across the country. Maya's name became a symbol, not of victimhood, but of courage. Social media exploded with messages of solidarity. Civil rights groups cited her testimony as a catalyst for deeper investigations. Universities invited her to speak about bias, justice, and reform. Yet Maya did not bask in the spotlight. She carried the responsibility with humility, always reminding people, "I am not the hero of this story. The hero is accountability. The hero is truth. The hero is love for humanity." In neighborhoods across Richmond, people held candlelight vigils. They honored not just Maya, but every voice that had been silenced, Every life lost to racialized violence. Every family is still grieving. Every child is still afraid. One vigil in particular moved Maya to tears. A group of mothers, black, white, Asian, Latina, came together on the steps of a local church. They stood holding candles, faces glowing in the soft golden light, tears shining in their eyes. "We're standing for our children," they said, "for their right to grow up without fear, for a world that chooses justice over cruelty, for a country that embraces every child as its own." Maya pressed her hand to her heart as she watched. This was the America she wanted to build. This was America worth fighting for. Walker's incarceration. Meanwhile, Brent Walker faced the consequences of his actions. In the quiet of a prison cell, he finally had no badge, no gun, no authority to hide behind. For the first time in his life, he was forced to reflect, not on the 4 years he had been sentenced to serve, but on the lifetime of prejudice that had shaped him. He stared at the walls, replaying his actions that night, the moment he saw fear, real fear, in Maya's eyes. And slowly, painfully, he began to understand the truth. He hadn't just pointed a gun at someone. He had pointed a gun at an entire community's history. He had become the very thing the badge promised to protect against. It was a realization that came too late to save him, but perhaps just in time to change him. Maya leads reform. In the months that followed, Maya became a key voice in national conversations about police reform. She met with lawmakers, testified before committees, and shared her story with honesty that cut through political noise. She worked to establish training programs emphasizing empathy, communication, and cultural awareness. She pushed for stronger oversight boards, transparent disciplinary practices, and community-centered policing models. "We cannot build trust," she said, "if we ignore the truth. We cannot heal wounds if we pretend they don't exist. We cannot create justice without accountability." Her words resonated far beyond Virginia. Major news networks invited her to speak. Nonprofits sought her guidance. Young activists looked to her as a mentor. And slowly, day by day, department by department, change began. A speech that moved a nation 1 year after the incident, Maya was invited to deliver a keynote address at a national conference on civil rights and policing. Thousands attended in person, millions watched online. She stepped onto the stage wearing a simple navy suit and a quiet determination. Her voice carried across the hall, clear and unwavering. "Some people ask me," she began, "do you hate the police now? And my answer is no. I do not hate the police. I hate injustice. I hate abuse of power. I hate systems that protect wrongdoing instead of people. But I do not hate individuals." She paused, letting the words breathe. "Because hate will never build the America we want. Hate destroys. Only love, courageous, accountable, transformative love, can rebuild what has been broken." She spoke of her ancestors, of their resilience. She spoke of young people marching for change. She spoke of her hope for a future where every child, regardless of race, could grow up without fear of those sworn to protect them. Then she delivered the message that would echo through the nation. We must reject racism. We must choose kindness. We must stand up for one another. We must be the generation that turns pain into purpose. We must build a stronger America, together. When she finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation, not of celebration, but of reverence. They weren't applauding her. They were applauding the possibility of a better future. Closing reflections. Later that night, Maya sat alone on her porch, wrapped in a soft blanket, feeling the gentle breeze brush past her face. The moon shone bright, casting a silver glow across her yard. She breathed deeply, finally allowing herself to exhale the grief she'd held inside for so long. She did not feel victorious. She felt grateful. She felt emotional. She felt human. And she felt hope, not for herself, but for a country still learning, still struggling, still reaching for its better self. She whispered into the night, "We rise by lifting each other." As the wind carried her words into the darkness, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her since the night of the encounter. The journey wasn't over. The work wasn't finished. The fight for justice would continue. But she knew one truth with absolute clarity. By telling her story, she had helped make America more honest. By demanding justice, she had helped make America more accountable. By choosing love over hatred, she had helped make America more whole. And that, above all, was worth every tear, every tremor, every sleepless night. What happened in this story is not just about one officer, one victim, or one terrible night. It is about a truth that America must continue to confront. No person should ever feel unsafe because of the color of their skin. No one should fear the very people sworn to protect them, and no life should be treated as less than human. But this story also shows something deeper, something powerful, something that belongs to every one of us. The courage to speak up, the strength to demand justice, and the belief that we can build a better future together. When Dr. Maya Reeves stood up for herself, she wasn't just fighting for her own dignity. She was fighting for the dignity of every American who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unprotected. Her courage reminds us that change doesn't begin in courtrooms or press conferences. It begins in the human heart. It begins with compassion. It begins with understanding. It begins with saying, you matter, your life matters, your safety matters. And it begins when we choose to love one another, not because we are the same, but because we are human. If we want a stronger America, if we want a safer America, if we want a more loving and united America, then we must carry this lesson with us. Reject racism. Stand up for justice. Help your neighbor. Lead with kindness. And never ever stay silent in the face of cruelty. That is how we honor the past. That is how we protect the present. That is how we build a future we can be proud of. So if this story touched your heart, if it made you think, if it made you believe in the power of truth, courage, and human connection, please subscribe to the Racist Reality YouTube channel. Here we tell the stories America needs to hear. Stories that open eyes, awaken compassion, and inspire change. And don't stop here. Visit the channel and watch more videos. Every story carries a lesson. Every video brings us closer to justice. Every view, every share, every subscriber helps build a community where love and truth rise above hatred and fear. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for standing with us, not just to witness these stories, but to help transform America one act of humanity at a time. This is Racist Reality, where truth becomes hope and hope becomes change.